Black man adopts a girl nobody wants 28 years later. She does this behind his back. The early morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the worn hardwood floors. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand, his eyes staring blankly at the worn newspaper in front of him. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic from the street outside. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was almost 7 a.m. Another long day ahead, another day of work routine and solitude. Ethan's life had been nothing but a series of monotonous days for as long as he could remember. He'd spent his childhood scraping by in a rundown neighborhood, raised by a single mother who struggled to make ends meet. His father had left before he could even remember his face, leaving behind a void that had shaped his entire life. As a child, Ethan had never known what it was like to have someone to rely on, not truly. There were no comforting words, no guiding hand, no father to teach him the ways of the world. The kitchen, small and dimly lit, felt suffocating at times. It was a place he spent most of his mornings in, alone staring at the same walls, listening to the same sounds. His mother had passed years ago, and since then Ethan had lived in the house alone. It wasn't much a two-bedroom home with peeling paint and an overgrown garden that he never seemed to get around to fixing. But it was home, or at least it had been. Ethan had long given up on trying to make a difference in his life. Every day he woke up, worked 2 jobs, and went to sleep. That was the routine. There was no time for anything else. And if he were honest with himself, he wasn't sure if he wanted anything else. But sometimes in the quiet moments like this, Ethan couldn't help but wonder if there was more to life, if there was something out there that could fill the empty spaces in his heart. But those thoughts always felt like fleeting daydreams, moments of hope he buried quickly, as if afraid they might ignite something he wasn't ready to deal with. It was on one of these ordinary days that everything changed. The local community center was hosting a small outreach event at the edge of town. It was a Sunday afternoon and the warm spring air felt like a breath of fresh air after a long winter. The event was simple, a picnic for foster children, a chance for volunteers to hand out sandwiches, take photos for brochures, and offer a few smiles to children who spent their lives waiting for someone to adopt them. Ethan wasn't one to get involved in things like this, but something about the event caught his attention. Maybe it was the sense of obligation he felt deep down, or maybe it was just a moment of curiosity. Either way, he found himself standing there on the sidelines, watching as volunteers handed out snacks and chatted with the children. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the scene. Most of the children were running around laughing and playing games, but there was one girl sitting alone at the edge of the field. Her name was Maya, and she was about 8 years old. Her shirt was a faded pink, slightly too big for her small frame. Her hair was light brown and straight-tied into 2 short pigtails that bounced as she tapped her fingers on her knees as if playing an invisible tune. She was smiling, though it wasn't the carefree grin of a child who was enjoying herself. Instead, it was a quiet smile, one that seemed to speak volumes about her inner world. Ethan's eyes were drawn to her. He couldn't explain why. There was something about the way she was sitting there, seemingly out of place, watching the others, with an expression that was both curious and distant. No one seemed to notice her. The other children ran past her laughing, but not a single one stopped to talk to her. Some glanced her way, but then quickly looked away, uninterested. It was a lonely sight, one that tugged at Ethan's heart. He knew that feeling, the sense of being on the outside looking in. He stood there for a moment watching her. She hadn't said a word to anyone yet. There was something about her that seemed different, something that made Ethan want to approach her. "Hey there," Ethan said gently as he sat down beside her. Maya looked up, her wide eyes filled with curiosity, and smiled brightly. "Hi," she replied in a way that made Ethan feel like they had known each other for years. "What's your name?" Ethan asked, his voice soft. "Maya," she answered, as if the name was a simple fact of who she was, nothing more and nothing less. Ethan smiled. "Nice to meet you, Maya. I'm Ethan." They sat there together for a while, talking about the simplest things. Maya told him she liked bubblegum coloring books and stories about brave dogs. She had a small notebook where she drew pictures of trees, and her favorite shape was a triangle. For the first time in what felt like ages, Ethan felt his heart open to someone. Maya was different from any child he had ever met. She wasn't demanding, she wasn't looking for attention. She was simply herself. When someone called for snacks, Maya jumped up and ran off without hesitation, waving goodbye to Ethan as she went. And just like that, the moment was over. But it didn't leave Ethan. Later that day, as the event began to wind down, Ethan asked the orphanage director about Maya. He learned that she had been in the system since she was a baby and that most families turned her down because of her special needs. She had Down syndrome, the director explained, and while she was smart, loving, and kind, her unpredictability and struggles with communication made her a challenge. Ethan learned that Maya had been through more than any child should ever have to endure, yet she still held that quiet smile, that quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would choose her. When Ethan left the event that day, his mind was full of thoughts, full of questions. But there was one thing he knew for sure: he couldn't walk away from her. Something had clicked inside him. Maya wasn't just a child in need of a home. She was someone who needed love, someone who needed him. 2 weeks later, he walked into the adoption office, paperwork in hand, ready to do what no one else seemed willing to do. 2 weeks had passed since the outreach event, and Ethan couldn't shake the image of Maya from his mind. Her quiet smile, her eyes full of hope, despite the loneliness she wore like a second skin, haunted him during the long days at the sawmill and the late nights working security. He found himself distracted, daydreaming about the girl he had barely known about. The way her fingers tapped that invisible tune on her knees, as if she was composing a song only she could hear. It was strange how quickly she had taken root in his heart. He had met dozens of children through his job, but none of them had ever made him feel this way. None of them had ever reached through the layers of emotional armor he'd built over the years. Yet Maya, with her quiet presence and unspoken sadness, had pierced straight through it. That morning, after yet another restless night, Ethan decided to take the next step. He had made up his mind he was going to adopt her. It didn't matter that he didn't have all the answers or that his life was anything but stable. What mattered was that Maya needed someone, and he was willing to be that someone. The orphanage was a modest building on the outskirts of town. It had a faded brick exterior, the kind of place that had seen better days, but still managed to hold together with a little love and a lot of patience. As Ethan stepped into the front lobby, he was greeted by the familiar smell of old books and the faint scent of antiseptic. The walls were lined with framed photos of children, each with their own stories that had yet to find their happy endings. Ethan approached the front desk where the director, a woman named Mrs. Harris, sat shuffling through papers. "Good morning, Ethan," she said, looking up and giving him a polite smile. "What can I do for you today?" Ethan took a deep breath, his nerves tightening as he spoke. "I'm here to talk about adopting Maya." Mrs. Harris raised an eyebrow, surprised but not unkindly. "Maya, the little girl who came to our outreach event?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, I've been thinking about it for a while now. I want to adopt her. I don't have all the answers, but I know I can give her a home." The director paused, her expression softening as she studied Ethan. She had seen many potential parents come through those doors, some eager, some hesitant, but very few with the kind of determination that Ethan displayed. Still, there was a hesitation in her voice when she spoke again. "You know Maya's story, right?" she asked gently. Ethan nodded again, but this time his stomach turned with a quiet discomfort. He didn't know much, only that Maya had been in the system since she was a baby, that her condition had made many families turn away from her. "I know she has Down syndrome. I know she's had a tough time." Mrs. Harris sighed deeply, looking down at her desk as if trying to find the right words. "Maya is a special child, Ethan. She's bright, loving, and full of potential, but she's also unpredictable at times. She struggles with communicating her feelings, and her behaviors can sometimes be difficult to manage. She needs someone who understands her, someone who's patient and willing to handle the challenges that come with raising a child like her." "It's not easy." Ethan didn't flinch. He had known all of this already. "I understand. I'm not afraid of the challenges. I just want to give her a chance. I want her to know what it feels like to be loved, to belong." Mrs. Harris studied him for a moment longer, as if weighing his sincerity. Finally, she spoke. "It's a big commitment, Ethan. You don't have any experience with children, especially not with children like Maya. And she's been through a lot. You'll have to be prepared for setbacks, for days when things don't go as planned." "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Ethan thought for a moment. He thought about his life, about the hollow years he'd spent, about the loneliness that had defined his existence. He thought about Maya sitting alone on the edge of the field, her smile both fragile and resilient. He thought about the bond he had already begun to feel for her, a bond that he couldn't ignore. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady. "I may not know everything, but I know this. I can't walk away from her. She needs someone, and I want to be that someone. I won't let her feel abandoned again." Mrs. Harris nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. "I'll start the paperwork then. We'll get the ball rolling, but be prepared. The process takes time." Peradinum. A few weeks later, after a flurry of meetings, paperwork, and background checks, the adoption was finalized. Ethan stood outside the courthouse, papers in hand, a mixture of relief and anticipation swirling inside him. It felt like the beginning of something new, something that could change everything. As he drove to the orphanage to pick up Maya, he couldn't help but feel nervous. He had spent so many years alone, working himself to the bone, never allowing himself to dream beyond survival. Now, with Maya in his life, he was stepping into uncharted territory. What if he wasn't enough? What if he couldn't give her the life she deserved? He shook off the thoughts, pushing them aside. This wasn't about perfection, it was about love, and he was willing to give her all of it. Succari, When Maya saw him that afternoon, she was sitting in the corner of the room, her legs crossed, a notebook in her lap. Her eyes brightened as she looked up, her smile wide and genuine. "Dee," she exclaimed, scrambling to her feet. Ethan smiled as she ran to him, her arms open wide for a hug. He bent down to embrace her, feeling the warmth of her small frame pressed against his chest. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging. "You ready to go home, Maya?" he asked softly. She nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, home." Maya's room was small but filled with light. Ethan had set it up with care, making sure it was a space where she could feel safe and loved. There were posters of cartoon puppies on the walls, a small bookshelf filled with picture books, and a soft bed with a pink blanket that Maya immediately claimed as her own. That night, after they had finished dinner, Ethan tucked Maya into bed, sitting beside her as she clutched her pillow tightly. "Good night, Dee," she whispered, her eyes fluttering closed. "Good night, Maya," Ethan replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so glad you're here." As he left her room and closed the door softly behind him, Ethan realized that this was just the beginning. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, he was filled with a sense of hope. Maya was his now, and together they would face whatever challenges came their way. The morning after the adoption was a quiet one. The house was still too still in the way that only a new beginning can feel. The silence was different now. It wasn't lonely, though. It was something new. It was the silence of possibility, the calm before a storm of change. Ethan woke up early, as he always did, the light from the kitchen window, casting faint golden beams across the faded tiles. His morning routine was second nature, one that had been the same for years. Coffee first, strong and black. The hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock, the only sounds to fill the empty space. But today there was a difference. His gaze kept drifting over to Maya's room just down the hall. The door was slightly ajar, and he could hear soft breathing, the rustling of blankets as she shifted in her sleep. For the first time, that silence wasn't empty. It was the sound of someone else in his life, someone he was responsible for, someone who needed him in ways he hadn't imagined. After a few minutes, Ethan set the cup of coffee down on the counter, his hands shaking just slightly as he made his way down the hallway. He paused at Maya's door, unsure of what to do next. For the past 2 weeks, everything had felt like a whirlwind of paperwork, meetings, and goodbyes. Now, as he stood in front of her room, he had to face the reality of this new chapter. He knocked softly, just in case she was awake. "Maya," he called, his voice quiet but full of tenderness. There was a pause, then a small voice came from the other side of the door. Ethan smiled to himself. It felt strange hearing her call him that, but in a way, it was perfect. "Hey, kiddo," he replied, his voice warm. "How about we get some breakfast?" The door creaked open, and there she was, standing in the doorway, with her wide eyes blinking at him. She looked small in the oversized pajamas he had bought for her the day before. Her hair was tangled from sleep, and her face was still flushed from the warmth of her blankets. But there was a smile on her lips, the same smile that had drawn him to her 2 weeks ago. Breakfast, she asked, her voice sleepy but eager. Yay, Ethan chuckled softly. Yeah, pancakes. You like pancakes, right? I love pancakes, she exclaimed, her face lighting up as she grabbed his hand and tugged him toward the kitchen. Breakfast was a chaotic but happy affair. Ethan had made pancakes, not the perfect kind from the recipes he had seen online, but the kind made with love, the kind that were a little overcooked on the edges, but still edible. Maya eagerly helped, even though it mostly involved spilling the flour all over the counter and giggling when Ethan pretended to chase her with the mixing spoon. They sat down to eat together, the small kitchen table now full, and the weight of the world felt a little less heavy. For the first time in years, Ethan realized he wasn't just going through the motions. There was a purpose to this, something beyond mere survival. He had someone to care for, someone to share his days with. Maya took a bite of her pancake, then looked up at him, her eyes shining. I made this, she said proudly, holding up her fork as if she had just discovered fire. We made it together. Ethan smiled, a warmth spreading through him. He never would have thought that something as simple as making pancakes could feel like such an accomplishment. But looking at Maya, her face so full of joy, he realized that was exactly the kind of thing he had been missing all these years. The little moments, the quiet moments, the ones that didn't need to be perfect to be meaningful. The days that followed were a mix of laughter challenges and small victories. Ethan quickly learned that taking care of Maya was not always easy. The first few days were filled with adjustments, figuring out school schedules, handling her doctor's appointments, learning how to manage her emotional outbursts when she got frustrated. But through it all, he saw something in her, a spark. Despite everything she had been through, Maya was resilient. She was kind, loving, and eager to learn. One afternoon, a week after she had moved in, Maya came to him with her small notebook. It was filled with drawings of trees, animals, and scribbled hearts. She handed it to him with an expression of uncertainty. Do you like them? Dee, she asked, her voice small. Ethan took the notebook from her and flipped through the pages. The drawings were simple, but there was something about them, a rawness, a purity in the way she expressed herself. The trees had faces, the hearts were oversized and colorful, and the animals were drawn with such care that Ethan could see her heart in each line. I love them, Maya, he said softly, meeting her eyes. You've got a real talent, you know? Her face lit up. You think so, I know, so Ethan replied, his voice full of conviction. You're going to do great things, Maya. I'm proud of you. But not everything was easy. Maya struggled with her schoolwork, especially when it came to numbers and reading. She became frustrated easily, and Ethan found himself sitting beside her for hours, helping her with homework, guiding her through the lessons. There were moments when Maya would break down in tears, unable to understand why something so simple seemed so hard. Ethan had to fight the urge to get frustrated himself, to raise his voice or give up. But he didn't. He reminded himself that this wasn't just about teaching her how to read or write. It was about showing her that she wasn't alone, that she could do hard things, that she was capable. One evening after a particularly tough day of schoolwork, Maya crawled into Ethan's lap while he sat on the couch, tired but determined to make the night a little easier for both of them. She nestled into him, her small frame curling against his chest as she whispered, I'm sorry, Dee. I tried, but it's hard. Ethan held her close, brushing his fingers through her hair, the scent of her shampoo filling the air. It was moments like these, quiet and tender, that made all the struggles worth it. He realized in that moment that this was what he had been missing all these years: connection. Someone to care for, someone to love. You don't have to apologize, kiddo, he said, his voice soft. You're doing great. It's okay to struggle. We'll get through it together, just like we always do. Maya looked up at him, her face flushed with the remnants of tears, but there was a hint of hope in her eyes. Together, she whispered. Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with emotion. Together always. Later that night, after Maya had fallen asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand, staring out the window. The stars were beginning to appear in the sky, twinkling softly in the distance. It had been a long day, but there was a sense of peace in him that he hadn't felt in years. His life had been turned upside down in the best way possible. Maya had brought light into his world in a way he never expected. As he sat there alone but not really, he realized that the past was no longer something that defined him. The future with all its uncertainties didn't feel as daunting anymore. He had someone to fight for now, someone who needed him just as much as he needed her. For the first time in a long time, Ethan didn't feel alone. The weeks that followed Maya's arrival were a blur of adjustments, growth, and moments that made Ethan's heart swell with unexpected pride. Life was no longer just about surviving, about getting through the motions of the day. It was about learning, evolving, and growing together. But with that growth came challenges, challenges that Ethan hadn't anticipated. Maya's first week at her new school was both a triumph and a struggle. She had been excited to start, eager to meet new friends and learn new things. But her excitement quickly gave way to frustration when she realized that the other kids could read and write far more easily than she could. Her struggles with language and numbers made her feel out of place, and the other children noticed. One afternoon, Ethan picked Maya up from school as he always did. Her head was down as she trudged across the playground, her backpack bouncing lightly against her shoulders. When she reached him, she barely looked up. Maya, Ethan called, his voice soft but full of concern. She didn't respond at first. Instead, she kept her eyes focused on the ground. When she did speak, her voice was small and uncertain. "They laughed at me, Dee." Ethan's heart tightened. He had known it was coming. Kids could be cruel, especially to someone who was different. He crouched down to her level, gently lifting her chin so she would meet his gaze. "What happened?" They said I couldn't read right," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They said I was stupid." Ethan felt a rush of anger and helplessness wash over him. How could anyone say such a thing? How could they make her feel like she wasn't enough? He took a deep breath, forcing his emotions to settle. Maya needed him now more than ever. "Maya," he said gently, his voice full of conviction, "you are not stupid, not even close. You're one of the smartest, kindest, and most creative people I know." Maya looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and doubt. "Really, really," Ethan affirmed, smiling softly. "You're doing great. It's okay if you don't get it right the first time. You're learning, and that's what matters." Maya wiped her nose with the back of her hand, sniffing. "But I don't want them to laugh at me anymore." Ethan stood up and took her hand. "We'll figure it out, okay? You and me. We'll work on it together. You're not alone in this." The next few days were filled with after-school sessions where Ethan helped Maya with her homework. It wasn't easy, but Ethan never once lost his patience. There were days when Maya struggled to focus, days when she cried out of frustration, days when the numbers seemed to mock her, and the letters danced on the page. But Ethan was there, sitting beside her, guiding her with a calm patience that he hadn't known he had in him. There were times when Maya would slump over her books, her head heavy with exhaustion, but Ethan would sit with her, patiently explaining things over and over until they clicked. Sometimes it took hours, but every small victory was a triumph. Every word Maya read aloud, every number she correctly added, was a moment of success. "Maya," Ethan said one evening as he watched her carefully sound out the words in her reading book, "you're getting better. I can see it." Maya looked up from her book, her eyes bright with pride. "You think so? I know so," Ethan replied, his voice warm. "You're getting stronger every day." But not everything was smooth sailing. The pressure of school, the struggles with her classmates, and the frustration of not being understood weighed heavily on Maya. She didn't always express it, but Ethan could see the signs. There were days when she would retreat into herself, hiding her feelings behind a quiet smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. One evening, as they were sitting on the couch, Maya suddenly stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the darkening sky. Ethan watched her, a sense of unease settling in his chest. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "I don't think I'm good enough," Maya said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "I keep trying, but it feels like I'm never enough." Ethan's heart cracked at her words. He stood up, walking over to her slowly. He could see the pain in her eyes, the frustration of a child who had been told time and again that she wasn't good enough. He knew that feeling too well. "Maya," he said softly, lifting her chin to look her in the eye, "you're more than enough. You've always been enough." Maya shook her head, tears starting to well in her eyes. "But I mess up all the time. I don't want you to be disappointed in me." Ethan's voice cracked as he spoke, the weight of his own emotions coming to the surface. I'm never disappointed in you, Maya. Never. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be anything but you. You are worth everything to me, just as you are. Maya sniffled, and after a long moment she wrapped her arms around him, squeezing him tightly. Ethan held her, letting her cry as the storm of emotions passed through her. He whispered words of comfort, telling her how proud he was of her, how much he loved her, how there was nothing she could do that would ever make him love her any less. The days that followed were still filled with challenges, but something had shifted. Maya was starting to understand that she didn't have to be perfect to be loved. Ethan's constant presence and unwavering support had begun to chip away at the walls she had built around her heart. One afternoon, a few weeks later, Maya came running up to him after school, her face glowing with excitement. Dee Dee, she called, breathless. Guess what? I read the whole book by myself. All the words I didn't need any help. Ethan's heart soared. He knelt down to her level, his face full of pride. That's amazing, Maya. I knew you could do it. You're incredible. Maya beamed at him, her confidence growing with each small victory. I did it, Dee. I really did it. Ethan stood up, pulling her into a hug. I'm so proud of you. You've worked so hard for this. As they embraced, Ethan realized just how far they had come together. The road ahead was still long, and there would be more obstacles to overcome. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid. They had each other, and that was enough. The months that followed Maya's first breakthrough in reading were marked by a slow but steady growth. Ethan had always known that being a parent wasn't about perfection, but in those early days when every small challenge felt like a mountain to climb, he found himself clinging to that truth. Maya's progress was small but meaningful, and with each victory, they both learned to celebrate what they had. But as much as they had grown together, life was never just about quiet moments or shared successes. There were still many hurdles ahead, and it was during one of those tough moments that Ethan would be tested like never before. The day started like any other, with the usual rush of getting Maya ready for school. Ethan made breakfast, helped her pick out her clothes, and packed her lunch, all routine, all familiar. But by the time they reached school, something felt off. Maya was unusually quiet in the car, her eyes staring out the window as the world passed by. Maya, Ethan asked, glancing at her from the rearview mirror. You okay? She didn't respond immediately. Ethan could see her fidgeting with the hem of her jacket, and there was a tense silence in the air. It was then that he noticed her hands were clenched tightly in her lap, and her knuckles were white. Maya, talk to me, he said gently, pulling the car to a stop in front of the school. I don't want to go today, she muttered under her breath, her voice barely audible. Ethan's heart sank. Why not, sweetheart? What's going on? Maya hesitated, her eyes downcast. The kids. They keep calling me names, she whispered. They say I'm not smart. They say I'll never be like everyone else. Ethan could feel his throat tighten. The anger, the frustration, the helplessness, all of it surged through him in an instant. The pain in Maya's voice was too much to bear. He knew she was struggling, but hearing it out loud, hearing her express her fear and doubt, made it feel real in a way he wasn't prepared for. Maya, he said, his voice soft but firm, you are smart. You are more than smart enough. You're amazing, and you don't have to listen to what they say. What matters is what you think about yourself, and I know you're stronger than that. But Maya shook her head, her lip trembling. I don't feel strong, Dee. I feel different. Ethan sighed and parked the car, putting the engine in park. He turned in his seat to face her fully. You are different, Maya, but that doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. Different is beautiful. It's just you. And that's enough for me. For a long moment, Maya didn't respond. Ethan's words hung in the air between them, but he didn't push. He just let the silence stretch for a bit, knowing that Maya needed time. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Maya nodded. Okay, Dee, I'll try. Ethan smiled, though it was a bittersweet smile. He reached over, ruffling her hair affectionately. I'm proud of you. I'll pick you up after school, okay? Maya smiled faintly but didn't say anything more. With a deep breath, Ethan kissed her forehead. Go on, kiddo. You've got this. The morning went by slowly for Ethan. He spent most of the day pacing through his work, his mind preoccupied with Maya. He knew how much she had been struggling with fitting in, and he couldn't help but feel guilty for not being able to do more. Around midday, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was from Maya's teacher. "Please call me as soon as you get a chance." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He immediately called the number, his palms suddenly clammy. He knew it was coming, but he wasn't ready for what he heard. "Mr. Carter, the teacher," Mrs. Jenkins asked when she picked up. "I'm afraid we've had an incident this morning." Maya, she had a difficult time in class. She was very upset, and when one of the other students tried to talk to her, she pushed him. She seemed to get overwhelmed, and we're concerned about how she's handling everything. Ethan closed his eyes, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. I didn't know she was that upset," he admitted, his voice faltering. "I thought she was doing better." "She's struggling more than she lets on, Mr. Carter," Mrs. Jenkins said gently. "Maya's a sweet girl, but there's a lot of internalized pressure. She's trying to keep up with the other kids, and it's causing her a lot of anxiety." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "What should I do?" "We'll keep an eye on her here, of course," Mrs. Jenkins replied. "But I think it might help if you could talk to her more about how she's feeling. She's not opening up to us in the way she needs to." That evening, after picking Maya up from school, Ethan knew he had to do something different. He couldn't keep pushing her to be okay when she wasn't. It wasn't about teaching her to get over the hurdles. It was about giving her the tools to face them and the space to acknowledge her feelings. When they got home, Ethan made them both some hot chocolate and sat down at the small kitchen table facing Maya. She was quiet, her hands wrapped around the mug as she stared at the steam rising from it. "Maya," Ethan said softly, "I need you to tell me what's really going on. I know something's bothering you, and I want to help. But I can't help if you don't let me in." Maya looked at him, her eyes full of hesitation. It was clear she didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to show how much it hurt. She had always been so brave, too brave for her own good sometimes. "I don't want to be different anymore, Dee," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "I don't want to feel like I don't belong." Ethan's heart ached. He reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands. "You belong, Maya. You belong right here with me. You belong in this world exactly as you are. You are not a burden, you are not a mistake, and you will never be alone." Maya let out a soft sob, her walls finally breaking down. "I just want to be like everyone else." Ethan hugged her tightly, the weight of the words echoing in his mind. "You are special, Maya, and that's what makes you amazing. You don't need to be like anyone else. You just need to be you. And I love you just as you are. Always." They sat together in silence for a long time, Ethan holding Maya as she cried. It wasn't a quick fix. There would be more struggles ahead. But for the first time, Ethan knew that Maya was starting to understand something powerful. She didn't have to fight her differences or hide her feelings to earn love. She was already enough. In the weeks that followed, Maya became more open with Ethan about her feelings. They had their tough days, of course, days when she wanted to quit, days when the pressure felt too much. But they also had days full of laughter, creativity, and quiet moments of peace. Maya began to open up more in school, and though the kids still teased her from time to time, she was starting to realize that their words didn't define her. What mattered was the love she received at home, the love that told her she was worthy of respect and kindness. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Maya leaned against Ethan and said, "I think I'm starting to get it, Dee. I don't have to be like everyone else to be okay." Ethan smiled, his heart full. "Exactly, Maya. You just have to be yourself. That's all I'll ever ask." And together they sat there watching the sky change color as night settled in, knowing that no matter what came next, they had each other. The days seemed to blur into one another as Ethan and Maya navigated the complexities of their new life together. Their routine had become more solid, the ebb and flow of everyday life, taking on a rhythm that felt comforting, even in its imperfections. But with each passing day, Ethan knew that they were walking on a path full of obstacles, some that were visible, and others that lay hidden, waiting to surface. Maya's emotional progress had been steady, but the shadows of doubt still lingered beneath the surface. Despite the growth, despite the victories, there were days when she retreated back into herself. Days when the weight of feeling different became too much to bear. Ethan watched these quiet moments with concern, knowing that this journey of healing wasn't going to be a straight line. There would be highs and lows, And his job wasn't just to help her overcome the obstacles, but to show her that no matter what, he would always be there, the constant she could lean on. The first big test came when Maya's school announced the annual school play. Ethan had seen flyers around the school, but Maya hadn't mentioned anything about it. As the weeks went on, the excitement around the play grew. Kids started rehearsing during lunch breaks, and Maya's classmates would talk about their roles in the upcoming performance. One afternoon, as Ethan was picking Maya up, he noticed her walking with her head down her steps slower than usual. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked, trying to catch her attention. Maya looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. I got a part in the play," she said softly. "That's awesome," Ethan said, his voice full of pride. "What role did you get?" Maya's face faltered and she bit her lip. I'm supposed to be one of the animals in the forest, but I don't know if I can do it. Everyone else knows their lines already, and I'm scared I'll mess up. I don't want to make a fool of myself." Ethan could see the conflict in her eyes, the mix of excitement and fear. He knelt down to her level, gently lifting her chin to meet his gaze. "Maya," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to try your best, and that's more than enough. You're brave, and you've got what it takes. You can do this." Maya hesitated, then nodded, her eyes still unsure. "What if I mess up in front of everyone?" she whispered. Ethan smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Then you mess up, and that's okay. Everyone messes up. What matters is that you get back up and keep going, and I'll be there cheering for you the whole time." The night of the play arrived, and the school gymnasium was filled with excited chatter. Parents and families crowded into the bleachers, eagerly awaiting the performance. Ethan sat near the front, his eyes scanning the room for Maya. He spotted her backstage, standing among the other children in their animal costumes. She looked nervous, her eyes flickering with uncertainty, but when she saw Ethan, she gave him a small, nervous smile. Ethan smiled back, giving her a thumbs up. "You've got this, kiddo," he mouthed. Maya's face brightened for a moment, and she nodded, though the anxiety was still there. As the lights dimmed and the play began, Ethan's heart raced in anticipation. He knew how much this meant to Maya, how much it mattered to her to be accepted, to not feel different. He didn't know how the performance would go, but he knew that this moment, this step in her journey, was something to be proud of no matter the outcome. The play unfolded with moments of chaos and charm, the children stumbling through their lines, laughing when things went wrong. Maya's turn came up quickly. She was to be one of the animals in the enchanted forest, and her lines were simple, but her hesitation was clear. When it was her time to speak, she froze. The audience held its breath, and Ethan could feel his stomach tighten. But then Maya took a deep breath, her tiny chest rising and falling with determination. She stepped forward, her voice shaking at first but growing stronger as she continued. Her lines weren't perfect, but they were full of heart. And as she spoke, something shifted in Ethan. He realized that it wasn't about perfection. It was about her courage, her willingness to stand in front of everyone, despite the fear. The audience clapped, encouraging her with cheers, and Maya's face lit up with a radiant smile. She had done it. Backstage, Maya ran to Ethan as soon as the play was over, her face flushed with excitement and relief. "I did it. I really did it," she exclaimed, jumping into his arms. "You were amazing, Maya," Ethan said, holding her tight. "I'm so proud of you. You showed everyone what real courage looks like." Maya beamed, her heart swelling with pride. "I wasn't perfect," she admitted. "But it didn't matter, right?" Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Not even close. It's never been about being perfect. It's about being you. And you, Maya, are more than enough." That night as they drove home, Maya couldn't stop talking about the play. She had been nervous, yes, but she had also felt something powerful, something she hadn't expected. She had faced her fear and had come out stronger for it. But the real victory wasn't just in the performance. It was in Maya's realization that she could try even when she was afraid of failing. It was in her growing confidence, the sense that she wasn't alone, and that with Ethan by her side, she could take on anything. Over the next few months, Maya's confidence continued to grow. There were still moments of doubt, of course. She still had days when the weight of her differences felt too heavy, when she struggled with school or felt isolated from the other kids. But every time she faced those challenges, she had a new tool to fall back on, the knowledge that she could stand up even when she was scared, the knowledge that she had someone who believed in her no matter what. Ethan watched Maya as she continued to grow both in her self-confidence and her abilities. Her artwork became more intricate, her schoolwork more consistent. She was still Maya, unique, vibrant, and occasionally insecure, but she was also someone who believed in her own strength. One evening, a few months after the play, Ethan was sitting on the couch when Maya came into the room with a large piece of paper in her hands. "I drew something, D," she said, her eyes bright. "I want to show you." Ethan looked up, smiling. "What is it?" Maya handed him the drawing, her hands trembling slightly. It was a picture of him and her standing together in front of their house. Maya had drawn them as two superheroes with capes flying in the wind. "This is us," Maya said, her voice soft. "You're my hero, D. You saved me." Ethan's heart swelled. He looked at the drawing, his eyes welling up with emotion. He didn't know if he had ever felt more seen, more loved than in that moment. "No, Maya," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved me too." The seasons had changed, and with them so had Ethan and Maya. Time, as it often does, passed with subtlety, but the shifts in their lives were unmistakable. The once quiet, lonely house had transformed into a place full of laughter, chaos, and the warmth of a bond that had only grown stronger. The world outside seemed to move at a faster pace, but in their small home, in their shared space, things had slowed down enough to appreciate every moment, every challenge, every victory. But the reality of life with its unpredictable waves was always just around the corner. Maya was growing up faster than Ethan sometimes wanted to admit. At 14, she had grown tall, her frame becoming more angular, her voice carrying a new maturity that both comforted and worried him. She no longer needed him to help with everything: her homework, her daily routines, the small struggles that once seemed insurmountable. She was learning to manage her own world in ways that made Ethan proud, but also fearful of what might come next. She had started to branch out, making friends at school, joining the art club, and even picking up the guitar on a whim. Ethan was more than happy to support her new interests, but it also meant something else: the growing distance between them. That thought gnawed at him late at night. As she became more independent, he found himself spending more time alone, wondering what his role was now. Maya didn't need him as much as she had before, and that, while a sign of her growth, was also a reminder that she wasn't his little girl anymore. One morning, as Maya was getting ready for school, Ethan stood in the doorway of her room watching her as she sorted through her clothes. "Everything okay?" he asked casually, though his voice betrayed a hint of unease. Maya didn't look up as she rifled through her clothes. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just need to find my shoes." Ethan hesitated before speaking again. "I know you're busy with school and everything, but you're still doing okay, right? You know you can talk to me about anything." Maya finally turned to face him, her expression softening. "I'm good, D. Really, I promise. It's just, I've got a lot going on with the art club and school projects. I'm fine." Ethan smiled but couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. She's becoming her own person. The thought was both liberating and heartbreaking. He had always known this day would come, but that didn't make it any easier. "I'm proud of you, Maya," he said, his voice full of sincerity. She smiled back, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something deeper, something she wasn't saying. "Thanks, D. You've always been there for me. I won't forget that." It was just a week after that conversation when the letter came. Maya had received it in the mail that afternoon, and Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table when she came in, holding it tightly in her hands. He could see the nervousness in her eyes, a mix of excitement and anxiety as she slowly opened it. Ethan didn't want to intrude, but he couldn't help but notice the tension in the air. It was the kind of moment he had been dreading, the moment that signaled a new phase of their relationship. The moment when Maya would take a step into the world beyond their home. "What is it?" Ethan asked, his voice quiet. Maya didn't answer immediately. She read through the letter again, her brow furrowing, and then set it down on the table. "It's from an art program in the city," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "They've selected me to be part of a mentorship program. They want me to come study with some of the best artists in the area." Ethan blinked, surprised but proud. "Maya, that's amazing. That's such a huge opportunity for you." Maya nodded slowly, but there was something hesitant in her movements. "Yeah, it is, but I don't know, D. It's in the city. It's a big change. I'm not sure if I'm ready." Ethan's heart swelled with pride, but he could see the anxiety in her face. The thought of leaving the safety of home leaving him was something she wasn't entirely comfortable with, and he understood that. Maya, this is your dream. This is the next step, the one you've been working toward. You've grown so much, and this could be exactly what you need. But I understand if you're scared. It's okay to feel like that. She bit her lip, her gaze dropping to the letter. But what if it's too much? What if I can't handle it? What if I fail, Maya? Ethan said gently, his voice full of warmth. You've never failed me, and you've never failed yourself. You can do anything you set your mind to. This opportunity is a chance for you to spread your wings, and I'll be here no matter what. That night after Maya had gone to bed, Ethan found himself sitting alone in the living room, his thoughts racing. He knew this moment had been coming, the moment when Maya would need to break away and begin carving out her own future. But the idea of her leaving even just for a few months filled him with a mixture of pride and fear. Would she be okay? Would she remember the lessons he had tried so hard to teach her? Would she be able to face the world without him by her side? The clock ticked on, and the house was quiet. Ethan knew that no matter how much he wanted to keep Maya by his side, he had to let her go. This was her time. The next morning, Maya woke up to find Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, a fresh cup of coffee in hand. He looked at her with a soft, knowing smile. I think you should go, Maya, he said, his voice steady. I think it's time for you to take that step. It's scary, I know, but you'll be amazing, I'm sure of it. Maya's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to leave you, Dee. I don't know if I can do this without you. Ethan stood up and hugged her tightly. You'll always have a piece of me with you no matter where you go, and I'll always be here to support you. You're not alone, not ever. Maya held him tight, her heart full of mixed emotions. She was scared, yes, but she was also ready. Ready to take the next step. Ready to grow. Ready to spread her wings. The following week, Maya left for the city, her suitcase packed with clothes, art supplies, and a heart full of hope. Ethan watched her drive off, his heart heavy but proud. He knew this was what she needed. He had given her everything he could: love, support, encouragement, and now it was her turn to chase her dreams. As the car disappeared from view, Ethan turned and walked back into the house. The silence that followed was different now. It wasn't the emptiness of loneliness, but the quiet of change. The quiet of knowing that Maya was on her own journey, that her future was unfolding before her. And he was a part of that, no matter how far away she went. He smiled, sitting down on the couch and looking at the pictures on the wall, the ones they had taken together, the moments they had shared. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a sense of peace. He had done his part, and now it was her turn.